Hey guys, it's October 5th, 2020. This is Joe Kopsick. I just wanted to give my thoughts on the September 29th, 2020 first presidential debate, Trump versus Biden, specifically about Trump saying, "Stand back and stand by, Proud Boys." I just want to also give my views on the Proud Boys. Now, admittedly, I had to look up a lot of this, and I just learned this today. Apparently, the leader of Proud Boys is a guy named Enrique Tarrio, who's a black guy, an American businessman, listed as the chairman of the far-right neo-fascist organization Proud Boys. Now I'm going to discuss whether I think they're really neo-fascist or far-right later in the video. He is the Florida state director of the grassroots organization Latinos for Trump. So I'm not sure if he's black. He looks black. He's Afro-Cuban. All right. So I just wanted to point out, this is the idea of this video. Proud Boys are bad, but perhaps should not be declared a terrorist organization and is not as racist or as violent as people think they are. And it's not to say they aren't violent. But yeah, I just wanted to point out this guy is Afro-Cuban. The other person who's like the publicly visible so-called leader of the Proud Boys, who's co-founder of Vice Media, a Canadian commentator, and the group Proud Boys, according to Wikipedia, originated in the far right. They call it far right, Talkies magazine. I don't know anything about this magazine. In 2016. So Gavin McInnes is the publicly visible leader, and he's Canadian. So here's what we know about Proud Boys now. They do exclude males, or they do exclude females because it's Proud Boys, not Proud People. But they don't exclude Canadians or blacks or Hispanics. Now, they've been described as alt-light because they're not as obsessed with race as the alt-right. And it doesn't mean that they don't have racist members. They do. Wikipedia describes them as ultranationalist, which is perhaps true, neo-fascist, maybe, anti-communist, definitely, reactionary, maybe. The other descriptor on there for ideology is chauvinist. Now, I want to explain what chauvinism is. And I'm just explaining what it is. I'm not defending it. Like anti-female, like misogyny, like pro-male chauvinism, that's not the only kind of chauvinism that exists. Chauvinism is defined as basically prejudice or bigotry. Any kind of in-group preference or groupthink, self-interest of one group over another. It could be based on sex, religion, national origin, anything. It's not to say that those are good, just because there's lots of different types of them. I'm just making a distinction. So, Gavin McInnes, here's the thing. Proud Boys have done good things and bad things, and Gavin McInnes has said, and good things and bad things, and I'm going to talk about that in here. I'm not promoting Proud Boys, but I do want to figure out to what extent they're being lied about or misrepresented, because I think that could help us understand them, and potentially, if it's possible to compromise with them, we should try that, because they support Western chauvinism, first because Gavin McInnes doesn't like how he thinks that women have a victim mentality. It's like, first of all, Gavin, shut the fuck up. A quarter of women have been raped, probably even more. The statistics aren't bullshit. They're probably underestimating those statistics. So fuck you, Gavin. But at the same time, Gavin has done one good thing for women, which was call Bill Clinton a serial rapist on national television, which he did on CNN in 2016. Now, here's the question. If Gavin McInnes is a fascist or neo-fascist, then why is CNN having him on TV to spew his hateful rhetoric? That just points to maybe CNN is a fascist organization, which would explain why they have CNN analysts and Pentagon people helping them with their reporting and commenting all the time. So it could be the CNN's fascist, could be the McInnes is fascist, could be that they're both fascists, and that's why they're on TV talking to each other. That's, I think, probably what's going on. They're just different types of fascism and different types of corporate media networks that are all basically the same, just with different color labels, and progressive and conservative, neoliberal, they're all the fucking same, MSNBC. So they're not allowing any freedom of dissent or speech. I'm surprised they even had McInnes on there. And he used that moment to call attention to the fact that it took 20 years for the PC neoliberal, well, I would call them the fake left. He probably thinks they're the actual left. It took them 20 years to figure out that their lead guy, Bill Clinton, is a serial rapist, and now it's taking them just as long to figure out that Bill Clinton or that Joe Biden's got the same problem, just he's groping children. So Gavin McInnes has done one good thing for women by defending them from Bill Clinton. He's done a bad thing for women by saying that they're part of a victim mentality. And if you really want to know about the history of the victim mentality in America, look up the case of Leo Frank, because that'll help you put everything into perspective. I don't know if McInnes has commented on that. Here's the thing. It's like him and Trump. It's like a lot of people hate them because they're conspiracy theorists and they talk about really controversial things. It's like I would support them more if they went more in depth about those controversial things. I would support Trump if he was more of a conspiracy theorist. Why did he stop talking about the Obama birth certificate? Why did he say Palestinians cheered for 9/11 and he didn't talk about the dancing Israelis? Because the dancing Israelis were represented by Alan Dershowitz, who is Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, and Donald Trump hangs out with Jeffrey Epstein. So I don't follow Gavin McInnes, but if he's out there criticizing both sides like he says he is, and keep in mind, it's not just both sides. The Democrats aren't the left. People like the Proud Boys and Gavin McInnes and Donald Trump, they hate all leftists, all people to the left of the Republican Party. Even though Pelosi and Clinton and Warren say, I'm a capitalist, I'm not a socialist, and AOC is actually for a mixed economy. She's not a full-on socialist. So they hate socialists and progressives and communists and Democrats, and they lump them in together because they can't really think in more complicated ways than that. And that's what leads them to do things like, according to the Wikipedia, support Pinochet and attack Antifa sometimes. Now, keep in mind, Proud Boys is one of the less violent organizations on the, alt-right or whatever out there. They're not doing a lot of violence. But Gavin McInnes said in 2016 that, this is on Wikipedia, he believes violence is a really effective way to solve problems. And he said, I want violence. I want punching in the face. I'm disappointed in Trump supporters for not punching enough. And he said, we don't start fights, but we will finish them. So that's not good. I don't want to encourage violence in the streets. I definitely don't want to encourage it against Trump's opponents. If I want to see anyone experience violence in the streets, it would be those white nationalists. Not necessarily trying to equate them with Proud Boys, but there's a lot of overlap, I think. The way I see it, Antifa mostly brings shields to protests, and the white nationalists tend to bring guns. So Antifa is usually defending themselves. They've been falsely accused of starting fires that they didn't start. Joe Rogan had to admit that in Portland. So Gavin McInnes said he was an anarchist in the late 80s. Like, he was born in 1970 and he grew up he was born in Canada, but he grew up in an environment in which, over the whole continent, both parties, both sides, so to speak, Democrats and Republicans. The Democrats were like this, becoming pro-crime or pro being tough on crime and pro fighting the war on drugs and pro-PC. And Gavin McInnes was there being like 20 years old, like, fuck you, I'm an anarchist. Fuck the Republican Bible beaters, and fuck the PC liberals. Don't tell me what to fucking say or not say. And that's cool. It's cool that he identified as an anarchist then. But, I don't know what he was calling himself an anarchist, as recently as 4 years ago. I don't know what he is now. But if he's saying, I'm disappointed in Trump supporters for not punching enough, then look, buddy, you're on the side of the police. You would have been on the side of Hitler when people were getting beaten up at a German-American Bund rally at the Madison Square Garden in 1939 or 1940. And if they're if they're praising Pinochet, and there are people in the Libertarian Party who love Pinochet too, and fuck them. Because, they deposed a democratically elected socialist leader in Chile. And then, who ended up in Pinochet's economic advisors? A bunch of students of Milton Friedman. So people who are learning Chicago school economics, basically 1980s Reagan libertarians, they were helping fascists do coups in South America. It's right conflationism and left conflationism. It's when you conflate communists, progressives, Democrats, and socialists, pretend they're all the same thing. Or when you have entryism, I forget the term for it, some kind of term for a hybrid philosophy, basically alt-right. When you have conservatives and Nazis, neo-Nazis and libertarians, when you lump them all together, if you view things mostly as a right versus left struggle, and I think that's mostly the way Proud Boys see it, and the way Trump and their supporters see it, and the way a lot of libertarians unfortunately see it. They see it as our party, it needs to be about capitalism and property rights. Like, what about voluntary exchange and like free markets and the right to have voluntary socialism. It's like, no, fuck that. It's like, we don't want to steal from anyone. Oh, you don't want to steal from the billionaires who have been using the monopolistic, evil, violent state to help steal people's money and give it to cronies? You don't want to steal that money back because it's stealing, because it's involuntary. Shut the fuck up. So if we would just try to appeal to the Proud Boys' Western chauvinism, which they want to protect fair trials, due process, and freedom of speech, the classical ideals that America is about. We have to hold them to these ideals. You have to understand progressives and communists, whatever, left-wingers. You have to understand how to appeal to these people. There's a meme with Marx in it, and it says, if you go far left enough, you get your guns back. We could do things to get nationalists to understand that the Democratic Party is your enemy. People like Bernie Sanders and a lot of communists, they're not necessarily your enemy. A lot of them hate Democrats just as much as you hate them because the party's been usurped by neoliberal Wall Street supporters. So my point of all this is that, yeah, fuck Gavin McInnes square in the ass with whatever he fucked himself with on his radio show, for saying that there should be more violence in the streets. I don't want to increase violence in the streets. I want the police to protect protesters and counter-protesters on the left and right from each other. They don't currently have any responsibility to protect and serve anybody or protect people from each other at these protests, and that's because of Warren versus DC. The thing I hate about the left and right and everybody is that, okay, cool, you got your left-wing ideals, you got your right-wing ideals, cool. Do you understand those ideas in depth? What would that translate to on a policy, on a policy level? What the fuck do you, everyone has ideas and values, no one actually goes into detail enough about it. They don't understand, the victim mentality in American crime and racialization of American crime began with Leo Frank. They don't understand that the reason why men and women are at each other's throats is because of the Violence Against Women Act, which said we'll have federal funding to prosecute domestic abusers, but we'll also take away 19 types of automatic weapons from Americans, including women who need them to defend themselves against their rapist, stalker, ex-husbands. So the Violence Against Women Act exposes women to violence. Bill Clinton, who signed that into law, exposes women to violence. He exposes his penis to women. And Gavin McInnes called him out in 2016 when his wife, who defended a guy who raped a 12-year-old girl in Arkansas back in the 1970s and possibly covered up physical evidence and colluded with prosecutors, dude. If the Democrats would stop nominating rapists, we wouldn't have to have racists just come out and be like, fuck the communists, Democrats are commies, we need to kill all of them and punch them in the streets and praise the cops, and we need to support law. So Gavin McInnes, he started out as an anarchist, and he ends up as a fucking far-right fascist. But it's because, the Democrats aren't giving anybody an option. It's like, if you disagree with the Democrats, you're not allowed to be labeled anything but you're a fascist, anarchist, communist at the same time. What you want won't make sense and can never happen. Fuck you, you should be a terrorist organization. So there's probably more people talking about we need to make the Proud Boys a white nationalist, declare them a domestic terrorist organization. There's probably more people talking about that than there are talking about the fact that the KKK still isn't a domestic terrorist organization. And if people would know how to appeal to libertarian ideals, we could potentially convert some of these Proud Boys and Trump people over to libertarianism and then get them to realize how much they have fucked with socialist rights to have their own societies voluntarily. So there's good things about the Proud Boys, there's bad things about the Proud Boys. There's good and bad things about Gavin McInnes. It's not to say there's good and bad people on both sides. I mean, there kind of are, but it's like you can't just label a group a domestic terrorist organization unless there's plenty of evidence and they've actually committed lots of crimes, as a group. You label them a domestic terrorist group so that you can prosecute them as one organization and prosecute all their members. If it's just bad actors, then they have to be weeded out. Now, I wouldn't say that about the police because it's a fundamentally corrupt terrorist mode of governance, and it's based on violence. It's based on provoking people. And if I met Gavin McInnes, I would just be like, look, the police are fucking out of control. They don't actually have any duty to protect us. So what you're talking about, your fear of left-wing violence, is just like you're just the other side of the coin. Um, I don't know. We need mutualism. We need compromise. We can't just have violence in the streets. If we don't talk about police reform, then we're just promoting a war of all against all, like Thomas Hobbes was concerned about. But we need to talk to each other, that's for sure. If this group supports free speech, then I support them, but we also need to hold them to their ideals. It's like a trust but verify kind of thing, you know. And also, they support legal immigration and making legal immigration easier. I support that, and the Trump people support that too, and good for them. But they also oppose illegal immigration, even when it's nonviolent, and that's where I disagree with them. That makes me an anarchist. Fine. I like to have a debate with Gavin McInnes over who's more anarchist. Like, you know, if they want to limit immigration, like, why? We could fit another 150 million people in this country easily before we hit the average number of people per acre in the world, per country. Like, we're fine. We're drastically underpopulated. There's a guy who says we could fit 1 billion people in America. India and China are the ones that need to unload people most badly. So I don't think it's necessary to limit immigration. There are probably plenty of people in here, in the Proud Boys, who think it's appropriate. Just keep in mind, illegal immigration is at a 30-year low. It's not at an all-time high. Don't believe the propaganda. People are being fed nationalist propaganda. And if you don't like socialism, which there's plenty of Americans who don't like socialism or communism, you have an affinity towards the right. It's hard to avoid ties with white nationalism just living in America. You know, keep in mind, if you're going to crucify everyone who's associated with white nationalism, you should crucify the Democratic Party, because David Duke has been a Democrat. I think I said Democrat both times there. Anyway, yeah, Gavin McInnes has called for enforced monogamy and criticizing feminism as a cancer. Now, yes, this is very toxic language, but he's also just basically a shock jock, okay? It's no different from Owen Schroyer on Alex Jones. And yeah, the guy has basically said, like, Owen Schroyer has said, Antifa is going to be at this march, show up with guns because they might try to start violence. Like, how are they going to start violence? With their shields? So fuck Owen Schroyer. But a lot of times it's sensationalist journalism. That's what they do. They try to piss people off because it has become so not okay to criticize, like, war and forcing people who fucking fundamentally disagree with each other to vote in the same voting block and shit. You're not allowed to criticize any problem in this country, especially if the Democrats caused it, because then you're just like, oh, you must be a socialist or a nationalist or both at the same time. And they just talk shit about you until what they're saying doesn't even make sense and you're not even allowed to espouse your views. But somehow McInnes ended up on fucking CNN. I don't know how that happens, but I'm glad it happened, because he said on TV, Bill Clinton is a serial rapist. And if he hadn't said that, then I wouldn't be here today in 2020 making this video saying Joe Biden's a serial rapist, Donald Trump's a serial rapist. Gavin McInnes, if you're an anarchist, you got to stop supporting the police and stop supporting this nationalist propaganda that you've read and that's been forced down your throat. Communism and socialism and progressivism are more benign than you think they are. Stop demonizing the left. Start being a true anarchist and criticizing the police and the fact that they have no duty to protect two sides from each other at the protests. I don't want war on the streets unless it's against cops and, if necessary, the Nazis. And nationalists, if you don't get on the side of supporting reform to police brutality, I'm not going to fucking care about you. I'm going to stop defending you when the left lies about you. You know, I'm not going to corroborate their lies, but I'm not going to fucking defend you anymore if you don't hold true to your civic national Western chauvinist. Basically, it was just, I think, their way of just saying, like, they're staunchly pro protecting Western ideals and the gains we made of due process, free speech, fair trials, all the stuff in this first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. So hold them true to their ideals, and they will start understanding that there's people on the left that they agree with, and there's people on the left who hate the Democrats just as much as they do. Thanks for listening.